It's a great question because it highlights the fact that in the present research landscape, we don't know how lipid metabolism and other lysosomal functions interact with A-beta peptides. The fact that the treatment with antibodies directed towards A-beta peptide aggregates has been modestly successful gives both rise to hope that targeting A-beta is part of a successful therapy, but is also disappointing in showing that targeting A-beta alone might not be successful in really stopping the disease. In other words, until we have a better understanding of how, for example, ApoE, as the most important genetic component of sporadic Alzheimer's disease, how ApoE intersects with A-beta functionally and pathologically, until we have that understanding, we won't be able to find the common ground. I think the one relatively firm conclusion is that targeting A-beta plaques is clearly beneficial to some degree. The fact that removing virtually all plaques doesn't stop the disease could mean that the A-beta plaques themselves are not the only drivers of the disease, or it could be an indication that once A-beta plaques have actually started the disease progresses autonomously independent of A-beta plaques. If the second case is correct, early treatment should be more successful in stopping the disease. This is what the majority of the field believes, but I'm skeptical that that interpretation is probable. I'm skeptical because it's hard to imagine why, once the disease starts, it becomes independent of A-beta plaques if it starts with the A-beta plaques. In other words, how that switch would occur, that all of a sudden it's independent of A-beta plaques and just continues after you abolish the A-beta plaques. To me, it's more probable, not necessarily proven, but more probable, that the A-beta plaques are a component of disease progression, a component, certainly one of the drivers, but that there's much more to it, and maybe even that the A-beta plaques are just an epiphenomenon, and that there is a root cause which might be more successfully targeted in therapies if we could only identify it. There are literally hundreds of clinical trials trying to find a way to influence the disease, to help patients. In my opinion, nearly all of these trials are based on guesswork. They're based on hope. They are just hoping that it might work. I feel that there's too much money invested in clinical trials at this point, because until we understand how many processes are driving the disease, whether these are independent processes or whether they have the same root cause, we won't be able to design therapies except by guessing. In other words, take neuroinflammation. It is clearly incredibly important. It is massive in Alzheimer's disease. Clinical trials that were well designed up to now have failed to have a positive impact. That doesn't mean that inflammation is not a major cause, it's not a major driver, it could be. But it means that it's not going to be a simple solution. I would urge again the community to focus on better understanding the root causes that drive the disease before trying to design more effective clinical trials.